protect the asset from the authorities by way of attachment or something else?
Okay, see, primarily asset protection is a terminology used when, say for example, taking any individual. Today you're into business, you are at a substantial level, you're standing as a guarantor in lot many places. I mean, as a businessman, when I need the funds, I need the funds. Then at that moment, nothing else matters, how I get the fund, at what rate of interest I'm taking, what collateral I'm signing, or instead of signing something more, am I signing the right valuation? I know someone who's taken a loan for 300 CR with a collateral of 1300 CR because the markets were not giving him the funds. So when you need the funds, you need the funds. A lot of times, we've also stood as guarantors. Maybe in your organization, you signed somewhere as a guarantor, maybe somewhere else. So not specific to the asset that you mortgaged, but in general, if you've not mortgaged a particular asset, and overall you've just stood as a guarantor somewhere. God forbid if that transaction doesn't go fair. There's a high possibility that the assets that you own could get attached to that litigation that may come on you. So how do you ring fence those assets? By bequeathing it into a trust. A trust is it's not a legal entity, but it's treated as a separate entity. So what doesn't belong to you cannot be attached. So if you set up a revocable trust is something where you move your assets into a trust, but you have the rights to pull back. So in the eyes of the law, the assets are considered as the assets of the settler. But if you get into an irrevocable trust, where you've bequeathed your rights of ownership, you are not the trustee to your own trust, where it means you're not managing. So you bequeathed your rights of ownership, you bequeathed your rights of control. So in all possibilities, these assets don't belong to you anymore. So no one can touch those assets. Of course, the Insolvency Act and a lot of other factors need to be considered before declaring that it's a pure asset protection trust, and that's where you would seek for legal advice or a professional help. But assets that don't belong to you cannot be touched to that extent. That's what asset protection trusts are. Similarly, say for example, when your children get married, you give certain amount of assets to your children during your wedding or ongoing, you keep gifting them. Whatever you're gifting them to the son, God forbid if he gets into a divorce or if he gets into any kind of litigation, everything that he owns at that point of time, whether it's self-acquired or inherited, 50% of that would get given away to the lady in case of a dispute or a divorce. How do you protect that? Instead of giving the assets to the children directly, you set up a trust, you make the son the beneficiary. It's for him. But instead of giving it in his direct name, you give it in the trust. So then what's at stake? Only the beneficial interest of his trust. So maybe he's generating income of 2 lakhs, 5 lakhs every month from there. So the entire asset, the corpus is intact. He may have to pass on 50% of this beneficial interest. That 50% can also be saved by making it a discretionary trust. It's a discretion of the trustee who to give, how much to give, and when to give. So in this case, if I'm the beneficiary, and God forbid if I get into a dispute outside, the trustee may just change his mind and say, I don't want to give you anymore because you breached the family law, or any reason I can give. Or I can just say that it's a discretionary trust and I do not want to give you. So then this particular portion can also be protected. So that's where asset protection is very crucial.
And why do you feel this trust structure is a superior way to the will? There's one problem with the will, it is all normally contested. Besides that, any administrative efficiency also is there in trust structure?
See, we can list down quite a few reasons why a trust would work over a will. But the debate here would not be a will or a trust. The debate here would be probably what suits me or the requirement, what I have. A will needs to be probated. A will can be contested. It has to go through its own requirements.
You need to die, right? For it to get passed. I'm so sorry. Anything out here is all black.
Absolutely. You need to hit the bucket first. That's the only way will trigger in. During that transition period, what happens? The entire family comes to a standstill. Still, a will gets probated in the Princely States, Bombay, Delhi, not Delhi, but Bombay. A will, it's mandatory to be probated if there's real estate in a will. And that probate process can take quite a lot of time. So during that process, you may not be able to sell that house. During that process, you may not be able to do certain things. Whereas in a trust, it's something that runs parallelly with you while you are there. In all cases, a client would probably choose a will and a trust because of the kind of asset classes he has. Like rightly said, if I move my real estate into a trust, it will attract stamp duty. So what I'll do is I'll move my financial assets into a trust. I'll get an administrator to the trust like an investment banker who will do the finance investment advice for me. I'll get a corporate trustee to manage it, and I'll become a beneficiary, or my family will become a beneficiary for my movable assets. For my immovable assets, I'll write a will that would probably move to my trust after me, or it would go directly to my beneficiaries depending on what I wish to do. So both would always work hand in hand. Not everything would go to the trust right away.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How do
The,
you control,
the man with the mic gets the.
how do you control the actions of the trustee? Let's say you have formed a trust and there are two people trustees. They can collude with each other and act against the interests of the trust. So how do you safeguard that?
See, there are certain things which
That
are
trustee could be an independent trustee or a corporate trustee. After all, humans are humans.
absolutely.
This one, and the second part is, what is the disadvantages of a trust? Some restrictions which one needs to bear in mind while going for a trust structure.
See, the
You
only-
can't honestly expect a trust person to.
From a client
Okay,
perspective,
okay,
we have to
we'll-
give disclosure that this
You
is
give it a
what-
shot. Okay, we'll
No,
believe you.
we'll take
Yeah.
it. The only disadvantage that I see in a trust right now is that I lose control. So if I'm a control freak, I shouldn't do it. Or if I'm a control freak, then I should do it in a different way. But that's the only disadvantage that I really see when it comes to trust. Advantages, probably the time will be too short to speak. But yes, coming to your first question, what if the trustee does a breach of trust? See, primarily the trustee's job is to abide by the requirements that have been set up by the settlor. At any possible point of time, if the beneficiary feels that the trustee is not doing the job that he or she should have been doing, he has the powers to go back to the court and apply for a change of trustee. So it's not like a relationship that cannot be broken. A trustee is a kind of an employee of a trust. You can always have somebody as a trustee and you can have him change later. That's one. Two is internationally there's some other thing which is a protector. In India we don't use that expressively, but internationally there's a protector concept that comes. A protector could be a third party whose job would be to overlook what the trustee is doing. And he could change the trustee, he could have certain powers. In all possibilities, these options will be exercised in absence of the settlor. While the settlor is there, he is any which way overlooking everything. He can change the trustee as he wishes. In absence of the settlor, you could add as a protector, and the protector could overlook what the job of the trustee is and what he's doing. In all possibilities, the beneficiaries are there who know what their beneficial rights are, and they are there to control the trustee or change the trustee later. These questions usually arise because, in general, we've always been looking at charitable trust at large. When the beneficiaries are public at large, who don't know what the beneficiary interests are. And that is the space where one can think that a trustee may do something or the trustee may do something else. But when it comes to family trust, very seldom you come across this.
So, Shweta, one point. A trust is a separate taxable entity. So, so that means there's another, it's not a human being, but it's an entity. So, separate tax records, all the paraphernalia one has to take care of.
Right. So a trust is not an entity, but a trustee is tagged as a representative SSC for the trust. But yes, you have to maintain separate records, you have to file separate tax returns, and there is a host of tax issues around that. But I would want to say one point that, as Tariq said, that a patriarch who is probably a control freak may think twice before putting in place a trust structure. That's correct. But there could be ways in which he can still retain control, but at the same time he can put in place a trust structure. So we have implemented a lot of cases where the patriarch still retains control, because in the Indian context, it is actually a little difficult to convince the patriarch to give away the control to anybody else. So therefore, there are structures in which it is possible. Obviously, we have to do some structuring around that. It cannot be a plain, simple structure.
There you have a problem with the Indian man. Question?
Sir,
Yeah, we'll come to you. We'll come to you.
based on the succession planning as well as preservation, how about the use of HUF and Married Women Act?
For family office? Family office?
Again, a Married Women Act is not a succession planning tool. If you could, again, that's my understanding. You may have a different view with your smile, but a Married Women Act is not a succession planning tool. It is something to protect the interest of the lady while if you ever have a dispute or a divorce within the family. That does not qualify for the assets that are there on your name. That does not assure you that the assets that are there on your name, how will that succession happen?
You are talking on the general term. May I say so? One thing?
Please, please,
My 5 fingers are not equal. What is right for him is not right for this.
absolutely.
So depending on the circumstances, these tools have to be used, and how you say that Married Women Act is not a succession planning, as well as HUF.
Okay, I would not want to get into a debate in terms of justifying which tool would be better for what, but primarily a Marriage Women Act, according to me. Okay, can you give me a brief definition of a Marriage Women Act? Anybody?
No,
Anybody?
This,
Let's
hang
understand it.
on. This looks like a
No, I want to-
coffee discussion after this. So we will move on to the next
Okay.
question. We'll move on to the next question. Why don't you ask, sir? Yeah. Please.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Can a trust own a running business?
Yes, it can.
And what kind of business it can own?
We could have all kind of businesses. The trustees, you could have all the control of the trust to hold the businesses. The family businesses could settle as shares into the trust, and the businesses could be managed at the director level.
See, what happens in India is typically old families, they would have businesses running under an HUF. There could be a sole proprietorship. It could be a partnership firm, a private limited company. A private limited company is easy to understand because shares can get transferred into trust. But how about others?
Even an LLP, for that matter, can be moved into a trust. A trust cannot hold an LLP, but the trustee on behalf of the trust can be a part of the LLP. So this
Even in case of,
And
partnership.
even in case of a partnership firm, you can convert that into a company and then subdivision of that company into the trust.
okay, it's always difficult to bring this aspect, during a discussion. But at what age, based on your experience, normally people are okay to accept this idea?
See, again, that's a very personal choice.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, it's up to you on how much you love your family. It's up to you how, I mean, death is something that can be untimely. There is no definition that if you're 80, you're going to go tomorrow, or if you're 60, you won't go, or if you're 30, you can't meet with a road accident. So it's a very personal thing. I mean, according to me, the moment you feel you've accumulated wealth, you should start preparing to plan it in a way that, God forbid, if you're not there tomorrow, it gets passed on in the right way. That could be a will. A will is an instrument which can be written as many times as you like. You can keep changing your will. You can keep updating your will. By making a will, it doesn't stop you from acquiring more assets. It doesn't stop you from doing more businesses.
Right.
But God forbid if something happens, at least what's there can get passed on to who deserves it.
But still, what I'm wanting to extract from you is, what's the average age of your client?
Please.
So, as Tariq said, there is no right age. If we have to tell clients the right time is now to start planning, because even if so we have actually cases where a patriarch of say 35, 38 years old also has settled a trust and implemented a trust structure, and there are people even at 60, 70 who are not ready to part away with their wealth. So it all depends on the attitude of the patriarch. But there is no right time. Actually, if I have to say the right time is now, as he said, once you accumulate wealth.
I agree with you.
So the average age could be between, 35 to, if you need a number.
As soon as you have wealth.
Yeah.
Or you can say when your bones start creaking, you can hear them.
Even before that.
Okay,
Thank
the next question.
Okay, I have
Okay.
one question from a tax perspective for Shweta is that while tax laws are still evolving, given that you implemented a number of structures, what could be, at least from a succession planning perspective, one common structure or something which is more commonly implemented and maybe kind of, whether it's a discretionary trust or a determinate trust, and why is one preferred over the other, at least from a tax perspective?
So, from a tax perspective, I think we should come to tax later on. First is, what are the objectives of the family? So, if there are, so some family might prefer to have a determinate trust because they have decided today as to what their fixed percentage of beneficial entitlement would be between, say, branches of the siblings. But some families do not want that kind of discussion to happen now. And so, therefore, they have a discretionary trust where the patriarch, he has a letter of wishes or in the trust deed directs the trustee to say that this is how the wealth should be distributed. So basically tax is not something that needs to be, basically tax is not something based on which you will decide whether it should be a determinate or a discretionary trust. Having said that, once you decide whether it's a determinate or discretionary trust, the laws are, in terms of trust structure, in terms of taxation of the trust, the laws are in place. So for example, a determinate trust is taxed based on the tax status of the beneficiaries, whereas a discretionary trust is taxed as the maximum marginal rate, which is 30%. So typical structures that are used based on the objectives, one could have a determinate trust, and then there could be beneficiaries, who could be individuals, or there could be entities which are owned by the family members. Similarly, there could be a determinate trust where the beneficiaries are other discretionary trusts. Or there could be structures where there are pure discretionary trusts, no fixed element in it, and the beneficiaries are individuals or entities owned by them. So it actually varies from fact pattern, based on the fact pattern of the community.
So,
Hello. My first question is to Shweta. You spoke about a recoverable structure wherein the settler is himself is a trustee and the beneficiary. I just give you a live example where there is a husband and wife and they have a lone daughter. So they have real estate asset. Now they wanted to protect it and they form a trust. Now they are the settlers and they are the trustees also, and they are one of the beneficiaries along with the daughter. How does the taxation takes place in this structure, and what happens to the taxation aspect when, if they died and the new trustees are appointed, then the structure becomes different. So how does the taxation comes into play?
So, see, the settlor is a trustee and one of the beneficiaries itself.
Yeah.
The trust could be treated as a revocable trust.
Okay.
Okay. Basically, income tax law has a provision which says that the settlor has a right to reassume power anytime. So, by being the trustee and the beneficiary, so he can himself direct that all the assets go back to him. Basically, then he has not settled anything. So, in that case, it could be just a revocable transfer. The implication of that is the income that the trust earns would be clubbed in the hands of the settlor.
Okay. Now, so what happens when suppose settler dies? Okay. And in the deed, there is a power to appoint new trustees by the remaining. So there are two settlers. So one of the died, and the other appoints a new trustee. So now the structure becomes a different. Okay, if new trustees are appointed, they're not the settlers. So will the taxation remain the same in that case also?
So revocability is triggered when you actually form the trust, because once you form the trust and you have the settlor, trustee, beneficiary all the same, your revocability is triggered. Now, so till the time he dies, it will be revocable, and therefore the income will continue to be clubbed in the hands of the settlor.
Okay.
Once he dies and the trusteeship is passed on to somebody else, then probably there should not be any taxation again, because the settlor is no more, in whose hands it will be clubbed then.
Right.
So then it will be taxed in the hands of the trust.
Right. My second question is to Tariq. Okay. One of the common question about trust which I face or comes in. Yeah.
So you're talking about distribution, when it is actually distributed? No, what I understand, it still continues to be in the trust. I understand
No,
that.
no,
So
no,
I
no.
thought his question was that the trust. Correct. What you are saying is correct, but I think his question was the property remains in the trust. Am
Yeah,
I
this
right?
is a structure is the property pass on to the trust, okay, once the settler dies. Okay, some of the properties remain in the trust.
Exactly.
Okay, they remain, that is managed by the trust. My question to Tariq is one of the common uh, conception about trust which I face is most of the people comes in front of forming a trust to just to protect the asset. Okay, even I come across a question where husband comes in and said, I want to form a trust because I might go for divorce in the future. Okay, so is it that once a property is transferred to the trust, okay, the trust cannot be contested, okay, it cannot contest in court, or how much protection the asset has once it goes to the trust?
See, it all depends on the timeline over here because there's something as the Insolvency Act that you need to keep in mind. Okay, two is that if your have your objectives very clear, then the trust can be designed in that particular manner to take care of your requirement. If your objective is asset protection clearly, then you need to take care of a lot of other measures by actually bequeathing your rights, by actually bequeathing your rights not only of ownership but also bequeathing your powers, avoiding being a part of the trust in any particular manner. So there have to be those kind of structures that need to be in mind, keeping in mind what the client's requirements are. But all that I do, or however kind of a structure that I set up, if the timelines are not in place and the Insolvency Act does not support it, by all possible means, the trust can be revoked.
Okay.
But if I've kept in mind the Insolvency Act, I've kept in mind, like today, say for example, I go and file for a divorce today,
Yeah,
and 3 months down the line, I go and set up a trust.
yeah,
In all possibility, it won't work because it's very clear that you're doing it for a purpose to not give away to your wife.
right,
But if you've done something a couple of years back,
right,
and God forbid the relationship didn't work,
right,
and 10 years down the line something happened,
right,
those assets can be protected
right,
because your intention cannot be proven that you've been planning something for 10 years.
okay,
But in the first instance, it's very evident your intentions can be proven.
okay,
So as long as you're not proven guilty, it's taken care of.
fine.
I have two questions regarding taxation of the trust. One, what is the tax status of transferring asset from a settler to the trust?
Sorry,
And
tax?
secondly,
Settler to the trust,
settler
what
to
is the
the trust,
taxation?
transfer of any asset.
Okay.
And secondly, what is the taxation on income of a trust which is created for the benefit of a minor child?
Benefit of a?
Minor child, minor child.
Okay. So your first question, what are the tax implications when the settlor transfers it to the trust? So from a settlor perspective, the tax transfer would be exempt so there's no capital gains on the settlor. From the recipient perspective, as you would know, there is a section which taxes income in the hands of the recipient. So if I receive a gift, I'm taxed under income tax. Now, you settle it. That's what. Right. Right. So when you settle the trust, as I said, in the hands of the settlor, there is no capital gains tax because it's exempt under tax. In the hands of the recipient, and I'm assuming it is not revocable, otherwise it gets clubbed, as I explained earlier. But in the hands of the trust, which is the recipient, the question is whether it should be taxed as income from other sources, for which there is a specific provision in the Income Tax Act. But for that, the status of the trustee, that's a little debatable issue, whether the status of the trustee would be as per the beneficiaries. Sorry? No, when you settle into a trust, from a settlor perspective, there is no capital gains on that, right? In the hands of the trust, there could be income from other sources. That depends on what the status of the trust is. So there is a debate on that, whether the status of the trust should depend on the beneficiaries or should depend on the trustee, or it should be treated as an individual in its own right. So based on that, based on the fact pattern, the trust can also be taxed as income from other sources when it receives the money. The assets getting transferred into the trust, the market value of the assets. I'll explain both things. First is when the assets are transferred into the trust, because it's a gift, right? The trust is not paying anything. So there is a specific provision under income tax which says that any individual or any company or any LLP, if it receives something without adequate consideration or as a gift, it could be taxed in the hands of that particular recipient as income from other sources, which is taxable at 30%, right? Now in this case, whether the trust is an individual or not has to be determined. It will depend on the facts, basically if the trustee is an individual or what is the status of the beneficiaries. So it's not a one clear answer, but it has to depend on the facts, what will be the status of the trust. If it is an individual company, LLP, then it will definitely be taxed in the hands of the trust. The second question is what happens in the income that the trust earns. So basically again, if it's a determinate trust, then that income will be taxed based on the tax status of the beneficiaries. If it's a discretionary trust, then it will be taxed at 30%, the income.
And what about the income of a trust for benefit of the minor childs?
So if the beneficiary is a minor, so the taxation doesn't depend if the beneficiary is a minor child, unless it's a determinate trust again. If it's a discretionary trust, then it is very clear that the income will be taxed at 30%, because the taxation of a discretionary trust doesn't depend upon the beneficiary. But if it is a determinate trust, it depends on the beneficiary. So if the minor is a beneficiary, it will be clubbed in the hands of the guardian. No. What I'm saying is, if it is a determinate trust, the taxation of determinate trust depends on the status of the beneficiaries. So if your beneficiary, one of the beneficiaries is a minor, then that portion, say he's entitled to 30% of the income, then 30% will be taxed in the hands of the guardian.
Any more questions?
Yeah, Shweta. This question is for Shweta and Tariq both. See, from succession perspective, as I heard also that trust is sort of it's not an entity, right? It's a loose structure, if I can use that term. So, can we use a private limited company instead of a trust, because that is more bulletproof kind of a structure, and more so from a beneficial interest. Even creditors or the divorcee or other cases, they cannot reach even to that benefit also, because it's a separate legal entity. I understand there could be some tax implications on a negative side. So what are your thoughts of using private limited company instead of a trust, number one? Number two, in your experiences, have you seen people using private limited company instead of a trust, or maybe both?
So, the answer to the second question, we haven't seen people using private limited companies. The reason is the first answer to the first question. Why no private limited companies is because typically whenever we have looked at succession planning, the patriarch always wants to pass away the economic interest but not the management control. So he wants to...
That can be done in a private limited company.
So in a private limited company, if you make your children as the shareholders, they get their voting rights.
No,
so if you don't want them to control the company, then you do not give them voting rights.
Right. And maybe through will that would be given. So I'm saying the person, the settler, he will remain the shareholder, and after that, that control may be given. And the trustee can have some position in the company, maybe as an advisor or through articles that can be tweaked.
Primarily, it all depends on what the need of the client is. I mean, there are multiple instruments available in the open market. What would suit somebody may not suit somebody else. It's not necessary that a trust may work for me or a will may work for somebody else. It's not necessary that every client has to set up a trust. Certain mechanisms can be done through a private limited company. Certain mechanisms, we have a lot of trusts holding right now, which are holding private limited companies under that. So
you have experience that?
Yes, we have set up trusts where private limited companies are held under that. So it all depends on what the need of the client
Private
is.
limited companies held under trust from the purpose of succession,
From
the purpose of business.
From the purpose of succession.
Right.
The business is done at the director level, and the control of the company is kept at the director level. But the holding structure is a trust where there is a private limited company under that, and purely used for succession instruments.
Right. So these kind of structures where private limited companies or LLPs, they are together used with the trust structures, they are quite widely used. But only a private limited company where the individuals are direct shareholders may not necessarily serve the purpose of many.
Because end of the day, the shares of your private limited company also need to be passed on. So a private limited company can be a good operating structure, may not be a good succession structure.
One last question.
Yeah,
We're running out of time.
I think I would.
So it depends on what mode are you transferring. So if you just settle. So it will, so again, from the hands, in the hands of the giver, it is exempt. Under capital gains, there is no tax. In the hands of the receiver, if you have transferred shares, now again, if you transfer shares of listed companies, then, and again, shares of listed companies directly to the trust, it could be taxed again as income from other sources, because you don't know, the trust status could be treated as an individual, and individual is taxed on receipt of listed company shares as well. So, but if you have a company below the trust which has actually received shares of a listed company, then it is exempt, because a company is not taxed on receipt of listed company shares as gift.
Okay, single sentence
Shweta,
question.
I think I would ask the last.
Can
Should I ask the question?
Yeah, where are you?
This is on on
I'm
your
trying to
right
figure
hand
out
side.
that.
This is on your right hand side.
Okay, we can hear you, doesn't matter.
Yeah. My question is on like what is the tax implication when the trust is dissolved?
So, dissolve meaning the distribution happens.
Yes, yes, yes.
So when the distribution happens, if it is distribution out of corpus, there are judicial precedents which says that it should not be taxable in the hands of the beneficiaries because they were already entitled to receive it, and therefore there should not be any taxation. But if it is distribution out of current year's income, then there could be taxation in the hands of the beneficiaries as well.
So if it isn't like it's current, out of current year income, then probably
Sorry?
it would be if it is out of the current year income, then probably it would be taxed in the hands of trust, and trustee would be paying the taxes, right?
So it could be either. The income tax law gives the right to the income tax officer to go behind either the trust or the beneficiary if it is current year's income.
Okay, but it would be a
Distributed.
single tax, right?
Yes.
See, yeah,
It would not be taxed.
it would not be taxed twice.
Okay. Okay. So like, like I don't know if this can be planned. Like, if one person has to give to somebody else, which is not related, and if we put one trust in between, the transaction like asset is transferred by one person to the other in the trust, and the trust then give it to the beneficiary.
So primarily, if I get you correct, what you're saying is that there's a third-party arrangement that is done, okay, where I am transferring something to the trust and making you the beneficiary,
Right.
whereas there is no blood relationship between us.
Right.
In all possibilities, the trust will be treated as tax at source, or you will have to pay full taxes on gift, because I'm gifting it to a trust, which eventually is benefiting out of a third party, and there is no blood relationship between that.
Okay.
So gift tax in this case will be paid by the trust.
And if it is a back-to-back thing, it will definitely be treated as a sham.
Yes.
So these kind of structures wouldn't work.
Okay, I think I've got some mixed news. The bad news is we have run out of time. The good news is we've had a great session, and Shweta and Tariq have just found out that they're in great demand. So tea time is booked. Thank you so much for being so participative. Shweta and Tariq had a list of 6 topics. I think we just ended up discussing one, which is not bad. So I wanted to thank you for being so attentive after a good lunch, and Tariq and Shweta for illuminating this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.